I just, well, this morning I just got finished with my therapy appointment, which I would highly recommend for anybody that works in anti-trafficking. I found that over the last couple of years, meeting with people, police, counselors, trainers, and things like that, that most people, almost all of them, don't really get any mental health support. And it's one of the reasons there's so much, well, at least it's my opinion, that it's one of the reasons there's so much burnout in this field. I found out that just basically by process of attrition, I'm now an expert in the field of human trafficking. I don't feel like an expert, but unfortunately I am one. So last night we had a fantastic meeting slash demonstration of our anti-trafficking product called One Generation at the Capital Factory here in town. They're a wonderful place. They allow us to use their VR lab whenever we want to, and they helped us put together this event last night, and they were absolutely wonderful. So huge props to Capital Factory. They believe in what we're doing, and I think they're an important force for good here in Austin. So what we did, I'll tell you a little bit about our product. So our product is called One Generation, and it is a product that is built to be used by schools or youth groups, community centers, churches, you name it, to educate people about the dangers of human trafficking and the slippery slope that goes along with it. So it's comprised of two aspects. The first aspect is written materials that are given to educators so they can actually implement an anti-human trafficking curriculum inside their classes, whether it's from a world history standpoint, a geography standpoint, science standpoint, psychological standpoint, or a health standpoint, sex education. There's a whole lot of ways that a teacher could decide to implement it. And it also comes with a corresponding very immersive virtual reality experience that we call Trapped, a VR detective story. And inside of that, it puts you in the shoes of a trafficking victim, so you learn what it is that was how she got into that situation. So it's a really, really powerful VR experience. I'm really proud of it, but it's been challenging to get feedback from adults so that they can kind of tell me what works, what doesn't work about it. And I've found that we've encountered a lot of we think that it's going to be incredibly difficult to get this in schools and youth groups because there's a lot of hesitation with adults, because they seem to not want to talk about this, not want to do anything about it, and it's really frustrating. So last night was wonderful because I had a chance to talk to people from different persuasions and with different opinions. So let's see, I don't have like an agenda necessarily or an outline for this, but I just really needed to get this off my chest, specifically because I was just talking to my counselor about this. And so anyway, the first thing was, I'll tell you how we did it. So what we did was we had the opportunity to kind of talk about the issue, talk about the challenges, talk about how many people, the numbers in trafficking are difficult to come by for every reason you can possibly imagine. People don't self-report it. Nobody's really keeping track of those numbers. So every number that that I give you or any other trafficking organization can give you, they are unfortunately they're wrong. There's just no other way to say it. But they are best guesses based on the best information that people can put together. And I can also tell you that everybody that is putting those numbers together, they really care and they want those numbers to be accurate. There's no groups that I'm aware of that benefit from the numbers being greater. You don't get paid by somebody guessing that there's 20 million slaves, across the world right now, or is it 10 million or is it 50 million or 5 million? I mean, how many is too many? So what I did was I showed a presentation that I put together, And I had put that presentation together for school administrators because I thought that, and I haven't shown it to a school administrator. This is literally the first time I'd ever done that presentation before. And so the presentation was put together for administrators, and my thought process was that, you know, the metrics or KPIs, if you will, of an administrator that they would be using to judge their performance generally turns out, unfortunately, to be the amount of money that goes into the school, and the amount of money from the school comes from the number of kids that are sitting in seats all the time. And in short, UT did a study in, I think it was 2014, 2016, it's 2014, and it showed that their estimate across the state of Texas was that 79,000 kids are being trafficked right now. And again, numbers could be wrong, but how many is too many? So I also did some research to try to look at the societal costs of of kids that get kicked out of school. So there was a study in 2012, I think it was, that showed that if there were too many suspensions, those kids would not graduate from high school. And I was like, okay, well, what's the cost of society of a kid not graduating high school? It turns out that it's $500,000. And that's everything from lack of taxes, lack of tax income, lack of income going back into the community, healthcare costs, prison costs. I mean, you name it, the numbers are there. You can look it up on the internet if you want. What's the cost of somebody that doesn't make it out of high school? So a lot of these people that are being trafficked, they're unfortunately in a situation where that is going to cause them to, get booted out of school, or for them to leave school. In fact, many of these victims, they don't go to school on Fridays and Mondays. They come to school tired, exhausted, they can't focus, and that doesn't help them graduate at all. So there are, let's see, right off the cuff, I can't remember exactly how many students are in Texas. But when you crunch all the numbers, maybe I'll post an update to this thing, but if you crunch the numbers with the number of students, I know how I came up with this number. So there's okay, if there's 79,000 kids in Texas, and it costs $500,000 for them to not graduate, you multiply it together, and it's over $400 billion lost by the state of Texas. Not to mention the lives and everyone that's affected by this. So if you divide that by the 9,500 or so schools, which I did the numbers as big as I could, so I include kindergarten all the way up to high school. There's 9,500 high schools, and if you do the math of 79,000 divided by 9,000, that's about 8,000 or 8. So it's about 8 kids per school. And if you divide this $400 billion by, God, I can't even think about it. But anyway, it boils down to about $45,000 in societal costs per school. So I'm not sure that that's going to make a difference, to any administrator that's looking at implementing our product or anybody else's product, but it's a significant amount of money if you're only looking at the money. So sorry, I know I digressed a little bit, but that was basically what my original discussion was with everybody. Wasn't even expecting to go through it, but so once we were done with that, I had a couple of people that wanted to go ahead and get started, and there were some people that were willing to do a pre-interview. We had a teacher, and she described, how much she knew about trafficking and what was going on at her school. And in short, she was telling me that her experience right now with kids is if they're having family problems or abuse problems, their parents are getting a divorce, or if they've been raped, or just horrible things that happen to them, they essentially, it's called disclose. So they disclose in the classrooms to the teachers and to her. And she said that was one of the most difficult things that she was working with as a teacher, because she was not expecting that was going to be part of her job. And so she basically has to be some type of psychologist to communicate with those kids. One story in particular that she told me was that she She had one kid that had disclosed some stuff, and she just, the kid started crying, just sobbing and crying through the classroom. And this is not the only time this has happened. And so she's in the middle of class. The kid's sitting right next to her, crying, but doing her homework. And the principal came, was walking by the classroom and peeked in, and the kid's crying and the teacher's sitting right there, and the administrator didn't understand that was one of those things that happened quite a lot. So I guess what I would say is that we're having these problems. They're obvious to teachers. The teachers want to do something about it, and they don't really know. They're not equipped to handle this kind of stuff. So I guess in a sense I'm saying there's already a crisis that's out there, whether or not it has anything to do with trafficking or not. These teachers are having, they're in a crisis situation because the children are in a crisis situation. And of course, when you have this stuff happen, how are those other kids in class supposed to be able to, participate? Of course, I have complete empathy for, the children that are having these problems, and you also have to think about everybody else that gets affected, and how's that going. It's not even a butterfly effect, it's a domino effect. So what's happening to them happens to the classes, and what happens to the classes happens to the students. What happens to the students happens to their families. So it's a really big deal. And so after we had that talk, she went and she tried our VR experience. Everybody had a chance to look at our educational materials. I had them there so anybody could examine them, and of course, willing to talk about them at any time. But she went through our VR experience, and I'm so thankful that she was willing to let me film her. Hopefully, I'll put it all together as a video and put it out as long as I get her permission. I told everybody that I wanted to piece it together so they could look at it before I posted it. But what she told me after the experience, she was emotionally affected by it, and I was like, okay, so tell me how you feel. And she said that when she was listening to the girl that's in the VR experience, she said that what she heard was her children. She said that the students that are in her classroom, she just felt like she could hear those kids basically kind of explaining their pain, and that she hears it all the time. And so I think it really affected her. So my take after just that one interview is that we absolutely have to train kids so that they learn all of the things that adults can tell them, can do to them, and trick them into one aspect or another of either just being manipulated, being sexually abused, being psychologically manipulated or psychologically abused, whether it's by their family, their boyfriend, somebody they don't know, their neighbors, somebody they meet online. Because, as adults, we have experienced things like that, and as adults, we know how to handle them, at least some of us. Obviously, if I just went and saw my therapist, I have things to learn still, and so does almost everybody. But these kids are just not equipped. They don't even know the words to use to describe their body parts. Sometimes they don't know, what the word sex means. They don't really know what love is. So maybe I should take a step back and describe a little bit about the interactive experience that we've created. It shows a lot, and what it does, it doesn't show it. It actually shows you what it feels like to be manipulated and tricked. So what we tried to do was create a scenario that was based on a very common type of experience that girls and boys go through as they go down this slippery slope until they could wind up being trafficked. So it's not just about being trafficked, but it's about that slippery slope. So in the experience, the girls met a guy online. She's 14, which is a very common age to be trafficked, unfortunately. So she meets a guy online. She's having problems with her family. Her parents got divorced. Mom's screaming at her all the time. She's not happy. Meets a guy online. He pays attention to her and tells her that he loves her and all the things that you would expect that associate with that. Eventually, they start sneaking out together, and then he, gives her lots of gifts, convinces her that he loves her, and she falls in love with him. And then the guy basically, I hate this term, but he turns her out. He starts, having her have sex for money because he needs it, and that's how they're going to run away together. So that's kind of what the teacher I spoke to last night. That's what she said she was hearing. She was hearing things like parents that got divorced, and the family life is difficult, etc. And what all that boils down to is that it weakens someone and makes them more susceptible to these manipulative techniques that can lead you down that path. So, our product isn't necessarily even specifically about trafficking. It's about being worn down. How does that feel? And how does it affect you? So, it was... for her, I think it was really hard to kind of come to grips with that all at the same time. It was very emotional, and I want people to kind of see it from that perspective. So I had this really a heartfelt conversation with her, and I had another lady who does a lot of work with kids and people that are mentally ill. And she had a very, very similar experience with that. It was very emotional, but she said that she had never really seen it from that perspective and thought about it like that. And I could go on and on, about her experience. But one of the things I thought was most interesting, we had a gentleman go through the experience, and he wasn't there when I gave my presentation about the difficulty or these numbers and the quantity of people and how important this is. So he kind of came at it raw, which was great, because that's the way many people are going to come at it. And he had some really interesting opinions, and I really feel fortunate that I was able to hear them, because he was skeptical, let's say, of the efficacy of this, and he was concerned that he didn't think this was something that he wanted his kids to experience. And I was like, okay, well, fair, tell me more about that. And essentially, I think he was concerned that it would be too much, that his kids would possibly be even, he's like, he didn't want them to be exposed to this type of stuff. And, fair comment. And I think that that's kind of the situation that I'm encountering with administrators at these different schools, and I need to come up with a way to actually address that concern, because it's I think it all boils down to the fact that there's no other way to say it, but this has to do with sex. We already have a difficult time putting sex education in schools. People believe that abstinence-only education is the way to go. Statistics show that that's actually the opposite way to go, but it doesn't matter, because they believe that, and it's really hard or impossible to change someone's belief system, and I don't really know how to approach that. So I'm doing the best I can to listen to everybody's concerns, so I can try to address them in one way, shape, or form. But anyway, yeah. So that really affected me, not because it wasn't a bad thing that he felt that way. It was a good thing, because he's showing me that this is the type of pushback that that I'm going to encounter. So how am I going to explain to people that have those concerns, that are afraid of teaching kids about sex, or afraid of teaching kids about bad things? How am I going to find a way to get it across to them that, you know, while you're an adult and you think that, you know, this is something that's scary, or, you know, too real, so to speak, or, you know, or beyond the pale, because, you know, that you don't want to have you know, somebody else teaching your kids about sex. How do we overcome that? And, you know, I guess I should also tell you that when we had our teachers get started on writing us our educational material, one of them, you know, we talked about this on a Friday, and she was going to do some work over the weekend, and she said that she came into school on Monday, and she had one of her children, and this had never happened before, one of her children disclosed in the room, and she hadn't talked to the kids about this at all, but basically the little girl came into the class and said that she's out on the playground, and boys are asking, or telling her rather, to do things that a prostitute would do. And the girl was 11, and she didn't even understand, you know, that it was sex. She didn't use that word. She didn't understand it. So, you know, my perspective is that if we have, you know, 11-year-old kids that are being propositioned or even told that they should be, you know, performing sex acts, we have a worldwide problem. And